Steve Deace, Blaze TV host from the Steve Deace program and the author of The Fauci Bargain. Steve, I know that you took a lot of heat for the things that you were saying about the Wuhan virus, the China virus, and where it came from. It looks as though you were right.
It's amazing what happens when you go with what's the actual information, facts, and data say, as opposed to what is the political narrative. Because the only science we've been doing in this country, Glenn, for the last 15 months is political science, brother. You know what I'm saying? That's the only science we have been doing. And if you go to our book, Fauci Bargain, it's got more footnotes than pages. I didn't put almost any conjecture in there. I didn't connect a lot of dots because I wanted the data in there to be airtight. But if you go to the chapter on the Wuhan lab, which has its own chapter in the book, we left several breadcrumbs in there where discerning people like will be found in audiences like yours and mine could connect dots. For example, the intermediate horseshoe bat, which is what was said to have feasted in the wet market that caused the adaptation of the virus from animal to human, that bat doesn't nest any closer than 600 plus miles from Wuhan, China. So it didn't come from the lab that's in the town. It came from a bat that's over 600 miles away. Yes.
Right. And it's very difficult to get and dangerous to get this bat, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
So you have to go deep into caves and places like that. All right.
And I know
get this bat.
And I know the Wuhan labs did a documentary back. They filmed it back in the summer before we had the virus. And they were talking about how dangerous the coronavirus is from these bats as they were collecting them. Correct. But apparently that had nothing to do with anything. All right.
Indeed. We've heard a ton about gain of function research. But one of the things, and that is in our book, all right, which gain of function research is essentially let me drop a nuclear bomb on Bikini Island and study what it does to the wildlife and the ecosystem, things of that nature. But I'm going to do that with a virus that can metastasize a lot faster than nuclear fallout can be, particularly in one of China's largest cities. But there was another kind of research that they were doing over there that is documented in our book. And in fact, our own National Institute of Health gave over $7 million to the Wuhan Institute of Virology in order to do this research, Glenn. It's called, quote, spillover research or spillover potential. And what this is, it essentially says they want to know, it's a fancy term for what are the odds or the ability of a virus, get this, to jump from animal to humans. We gave over $7 million to the Wuhan Institute of Virology to study that spillover potential. That hasn't even made it into much of the mainstream media yet, except outside of Steve Hilton's show on Fox News. But that is that's sort of, if this issue was a southpaw, we're jabbing with the right hand right now on gain of function. The spillover potential is when we come with the left now for the knockout punch. Because why would we ever study that, first of all? And then combine that along with gain of function research. It's like what Woody Hayes once said about the forward pass, Glenn. 3 things can happen, and 2 of them are bad, okay?
Why would the NIH do this? Why with the backing of Fauci? Why would Fauci say, yes, we'll send you $7 million to the Wuhan Institute of Virology? Why would he do that to investigate the spillover?
So I've been asked a lot of questions, but one in particular doing publicity for this book for the last month and a half, because one of the things that we see in our book is we follow the chain of evidence of what Ron DeSantis in his endorsement of our book called Fauciism. And if you look at what Anthony Fauci was saying about COVID-19 in January, February, in the New England Journal of Medicine, even into early March, everything he said about its modest risk, take it seriously, but he had a modest risk assessment. 15 months later, all of the data shows he was correct in his initial assumptions. But on March 11th, he goes to Congress, does a complete 180, even from what he was telling the White House. We found out from sources inside the White House. They were blindsided by this, too. On March 11th is when he goes to Congress, says it's going to be 10 times worse than the flu. It's capped in trips, basically. The country was all shut down. The NBA shut down that night after the Rudy Gobert positive
what
test
happened?
And everything
What
else.
happened?
My theory, I didn't put it in the book, okay, but here's my theory. My theory is that Francis Collins, who runs the NIH, who's Fauci's boss, is that Collins and Fauci had kind of been snookered into a Chinese investigative co-op after the first SARS on how to preemptively get ahead of the new SARS. and probably didn't even know things like the head of the Wuhan Institute of Virology was actually appointed by China, was their former bioweapons program director. That's documented in our book as well.
Jeez.
Probably didn't even know these things because we're all just one big globalist happy family. They've had most favored nation status. They're half the country's landlord nowadays, Glenn. I mean, with the Chi-Coms in the U.S., I mean, it's ebony and ivory, brother. You know what I'm saying? Crimson and clover. And so they probably didn't even ask any questions. And so all the initial assumptions that they got about COVID in early 2020 probably all came from China. And then somewhere along the line, the intelligence came into the White House. The stuff that you're hearing right now that was just in the Wall Street Journal, this is the stuff that the president and the White House were probably told 15 months ago, and word gets over to NIH and NIAID, that's Fauci's department, and suddenly he's like, oh, bleep, I guess I can't trust all of their assumptions. We're starting from ground zero. We have to start our own real-time data. We don't know what we're dealing with. And I think that explains all of the duplicity. That explains why he has denied natural immunity and a lot of scientific precedent about airborne viruses and why masks don't work, because he has been entirely unsure that we were actually dealing with a natural phenomenon that fell within the laws of established science, when maybe a synthetic or an engineered or a designer virus would not. And I think that is the smoking gun here. And I think then you throw in all the media making him a papal-like figure and the ego gets involved. I think that's the frosting on the cake. But I think the origin of all of the duplicity is when the intel came in that China's probably not telling us the truth. In late January of 2020, the WHO in a tweet, the last I checked, is still up. The World Health Organization tweeted out, China assures us there's no person-to-person transmission of COVID-19. That was in late January of 2020. And I think he figured out, oh, bleep, we got our hands in the cookie jar here, and they've been trying to figure out how to cover their steps ever since.
Okay, so talking about covering it, tell me the role of EcoHealth and Peter Daszak.
They're the Planned Parenthood of this operation. And Peter Daszak is the Margaret Sanger, if you will. EcoHealth, so when Fauci said to Rand Paul about a week and a half ago that I've not funded any gain-of-function research, all right, this is a little bit like when your politicians have told our audiences for the last 30 years since the Hyde Amendment, we don't fund abortions. Federal government can't do that. We do, though, however, just give $500 million a year to the organization that does more of them than anybody else. And I'm sure they're just going to use that for clerical work, charity, and
Correct.
all those breast cancer exams they never do, right? That's what EcoHealth was. EcoHealth was the funneling mechanism here. The money went to the money for the gain of function research went to them. They were the ones who partnered with the Wuhan Institute, with actually conducting the research, which, by the way, scientists from all over the country, Johns Hopkins even, have been very critical of this kind of research.
Correct.
The Obama
They actually got it, wasn't it? Yeah, I was going to say, wasn't John Hopkins instrumental in getting it shut down?
Yes, and back in 2014, it was shut down with their and others' recommendations by the Obama administration. It started again in 2017. I've not been able to find out how. I don't know if it was just as simple as they just figured with the transition to a new administration, they could slip it past the bureaucratic goalie and it would go unnoticed. But it just kind of re-began again in 2017. I don't really know how or what was the impetus for that. But EcoHealth is the mechanism by which the funding was given to them, and then they helped conduct that research. Peter Daszak was somebody who was all over the media last year, claiming this was a conspiracy theory, everything else. I believe he was featured in a 60 Minutes profile that took Emerald Robinson's work at Newsmax, connecting a lot of these dots, and called her a conspiracy theory, and she doesn't know what she's talking about. Well, he ended up being the only American that was appointed to the World Health Organization panel to then look at the true origins of the coronavirus.
Wow.
And came back and told us that it was a natural phenomenon, but it's the guy that was working as EcoHealth in helping conduct the actual research. So everywhere you go, it stinks, Glenn. Bad.
All right. Now, let me cover this one thing, and then I'm going to take a 1-minute break and come back and ask you a question. Before I take the break, you said that the bioweapons program, the Communist Party bioweapons chief, was made the chief of the Wuhan Institute, where we think that this virus came from. I read 2 weeks ago, I think it was, that that same head was pushing for some sort of a weapon that would be a coronavirus that they could unleash, and it would take out the West, and that would be enough of a stumbling block to take all of their economies down, and China could rise as the power. Is that true? Are people looking into that? What is that story?
Well, let's just connect a couple of quick dots. All right. So in 2018 and 2019, China is riddled with the first real threat against its hegemony in the region, with all of the riots and protests going on in its chief financial district of Hong Kong. At that time, you've got Trump waging an all-out trade war against them at the exact same time. And so the first time they're economically quartered, and it really since pre-Tiananmen Square, suddenly this virus emerges out of Wuhan, China, from a bat that nests 600 miles away, because if we didn't have Wuhan for luck, Glenn, we'd have no luck at all. Shuts all the Western economies down. Oh, by the way, it uniquely targets, unlike Spanish flu, unlike polio, Hong Kong flu, which really didn't discriminate against demographics, this uniquely targets the elderly and the infirm. So a virus comes from a country that forcibly aborts children it doesn't want at the nascent stage, and then later on, when they're no longer productive citizens, wipes out nursing homes all over the fruited plain. And this all just happens to coincide at a time China is the most threatened it's been in about 40 years. It's one hell of a coincidence, I'll say that.
There is also a serious paper that is going to be coming out soon that is looking into why there was such a marked difference between European people, ancestors of European descent, and Asian descent. And the response quickly is, well, that's because all those Asian countries, they were prepared for things like this. But it doesn't seem logical. Are you following any of that?
It doesn't seem logical. I mean, we're sitting here right now. We're still not even sure the Tokyo Olympics are going to take place later this summer. And we've been told 3 times in our media that Japan has conquered the virus with masks as their cases continue to escalate and skyrocket. They also, by the way, have a level of what we call crossover immunity from, coronaviruses, as your audience probably knows, are not new. They've mutated into other forms like colds or things of that nature in the last few decades. They get more exposed to those over in the Asian countries than we do. Japan still cannot get its case amount under control that we can sit here today as we head into Memorial Day weekend. We still don't know yet, while the virus is in full retreat here in the U.S. We still can't sit here today and say in a couple of months we're going to have the Summer Olympics in Tokyo. We don't know that yet.